Manus. A manual, a handbook, tells me that a supposed orthodoxy of script writing is that a minute of screen time equates to a single paper or digital page. What might I do to you on a side of A4? Beat you to death, cut your throat, flay the skin from your balls. I am often murderous when I write. Screen violence must function as spectacle. The beating is seen from without, balletic, choreographed, the baseball bat describing its trajectories in flashing aluminium, which your eyes continue to track long after the beating body has lost its sight. The throat is cut from behind, no one body obscuring the other, in order that the steel of the knife might most pleasingly reveal the slit, the gape, the outpouring. But real violence is occult. It happens in those spaces where the camera cannot go, and where the arc of the action is never seen in its entirety. Think about the time you fought, how close you were, how blind, how frantic. A dance chart for violence would be a blot, a blur, a spreading stain. Perhaps for this reason, the most successful depictions of violence are found in pornography, specifically in the close-up penetration shots of arses or cunts by cocks of improbable size. But even then, there is a problem, in that the display of the weapon demands only a partial insertion, the paradox of a visibility that conceals the depth of the coming, hoped-for wound. And another problem, the need for true fulfillment, to see the face in pleasure pain, requiring those contorted poses wherein both face and whole are glimpsed, that threaten, in their ridiculousness, to undermine the function of the image. Cocksucking then? No. Even that proximate arrangement of cock-hole eye does not suffice, in that when the cock is really down the gagging throat, the face is shuttered, pressed into the groin. The now closed Twitter account, Puke Sluts, neatly sidestepped these constraints by substituting the hand, the fist, the arm for the Viagra'd cock. In a curious reversal of pornography's usual directional thrust, their 2 to 3 second gifs most often show the hand withdrawing from the mouth, to be followed by a gush of vomit, skeins of drool, and sometimes blood. While these truncated loops might arguably be visually honest, they are temporarily deceitful. Far from needing a page, you could write them on the back of your hand. How earnest I sound, I who looked over and over, much, much more than I needed to. And now I ask myself, does one look at or does one watch such things? Neither one thing nor another. GIFs are insistent repetitions, not quite movement. They are photographs that retch, films that stutter. Do we write them in space or in time? Like the monotony of Puke Sluts, with its timeline of different same throat fucks, the subject's experience of violence is a concealment of its origins that paradoxically returns them to this blinded, silenced point again and again. We cannot see ourselves from inside the event. We cannot observe the space we inhabit. Our eyes half shut and our ears roaring, we cannot be our own reliable witness. In this way, the duration of violence is endless, whether it is a single action stretched along the course of a lifetime or a multiplicity collapsed into a single point experienced as limbo, both inhabiting a claustrophobic, looped memory space, simultaneously recalled and repressed in a GIF-like infinite stammer. There is no solid ground, and there is no separation between past and present. The scene is always int, ext, or ext, int, and the POV is always that of floating dissociation, fragments, rapid edits, recursions, rewindings. Never syntagmatic, the paradigm is one of speaking in graphemes, confines of space confounding any narrative that might escape its beginning. Like the Puke Sluts gifs, violence stifles sound, smashes language. The force of the event is deafening. It punches a void in discourse, and there is no end to it. There are things I cannot write, not from shame or fear, though of course there's too, but because they exist outside of the flow of language. Sometimes it feels as if I am gagging on my own tongue. The dictats of the screenwriting manual demand that we script our 1 minute of violence in Courier 12-point. Introduced in the 1950s with the advent of the electric typewriter, it was adopted by the newly emerging home computers in the 1980s, as it used a fixed width font for every character, thus placing fewer demands on the computer's memory than the nuances of, say, Perpetua or Dido. Additionally, it supposedly accommodates the specious idea of 1 page per minute orthodoxy more readily than other fonts. Using Courier feels profoundly strange. On the one hand, there is the visual displeasure of a very ugly type of writing. And on the other, there is the knowledge that one's capacity for memory, the ways in which one's memory can be stored or used, and the space in which one can experience its duration, are being subtly, metaphorically constrained. Another feature of generic screenwriting is that it's characterized not only by what is present, but also by what is absent. Stephen Price, in his History of the Screenplay, describes the industry standard as being notable for its white space, making the pages user-friendly for industry readers and filmmakers who needed to skim and annotate the script for their own purposes. As on the paper, so in memory, the white spaces of forgetting can be directed and staged by those who produce and police violence in order to control not just how much can be spoken, but in what way such stories can be heard. Perhaps like Puke Sluts, the manual is a throat fuck, a meta-narrative of silence. Manus, manualis, manual. Silence is the hand in which violence hides, the cautionary finger raised to pursed lips. Last night, I slapped a man across the face. I saw him draw, and in response, so quick, so unexpected, my hand rose up in time with his, the crack of the slap exploding as his fingers went to grip my arm. I saw the shockwave widen out his eyes and slop the beer from the can held in his other hand. I saw my violence written on his face, and through that seeing can conscript him thus. Int, train, night. A young man sits with a group halfway down the carriage. They're drunk, rowdy, spreading out and blocking the aisle. He looks up and sees a woman trying to get past. The shouting from his friends gets louder. As the woman reaches him, he goes to grab her upper arm, laughing. Young man, hey, continued. Her face shoots up and she slaps him hard across the face. Woman, don't you fucking touch me, continued. His friends go quiet. We see the young man's shocked face. He has spilt beer over himself. We see the woman disappearing into the next carriage. The speed of my reaction shook me. I'm useless at tennis, sports of any kind, activities requiring coordination, a sharp response, and yet my hand and eye worked so quickly, in such accord, that I became reptilian. I frighten myself when I go to the places where I bypass language, for these are the places where words are murdered. I murdered them myself. In this place, I can observe nothing. In the train scenario, though, it is I who enact the violence. My recall is linear and clear. My immediate emotions easily identified. Fury, pleasure, and triumph in equal parts. A marked absence of fear. Had I been arrested, charged, for it was an assault, my account would have been articulate, coherent, chronological, and calm, the language of the reliable witness, participating in their own prosecution. Yet when violence is enacted upon us, the relations between words and time break down. The black stuff of characters and scene headings are dislocated from actions and dialogue. Narrative crumbles, and we are left only with Price's remarkable absences, the white space of blank repetition, where our stories can be overwritten, denied. In this scenario, we have no truth. Violence plucks the words back down our throats, makes liars of us all. I see myself as a speculative voiceover and speak the dialogue of a fractured off-screen. The thrust of violence is not narrated in the moment of its thrusting, but stammered out in later repetitions. We are not quite movement. We are photographs that retch. We are films that stutter. We are written outside of space and time. Perhaps the only screenplay for the violence enacted upon us is a blank page, an empty file, unnamed. Int, nowhere, nothing.